Recording in progress. The degree to which he devoted his life to making things happen. It's called Ben Amishadai. Okay, so he judged together with other people. He wasn't alone. So the same way, both.
Okay, almost ready. We're just waiting for the Zoom class to start. Waiting for the other class to finish, and this will begin.
Recording stopped.
Okay, recording stopped, recording started. How are you doing, Golda?
Recording in progress.
I heard you had a zakot this morning.
Yeah, every day.
Well,
Every day.
do you have a special? Do you have a safe room in your house? Or you have to run out to those stairs.
No, we go either our hallway, which we all meet, all the people really go in the hallway, but we have a McLot downstairs. It's big, cleaned up. If we really want to go down 2 flights for 10 minutes, and my husband can't go up and down like that, so it has to be really scary and a lot of booms for us to go down.
Wow.
But we're okay.
Wow. Okay.
Baruch Hashem, it's all happening the way it's supposed to, right?
Clearly. It's funny because on my screen you're sitting right next to Chavi Shmel. I don't know if you could see.
I know. I saw her name. I'm so excited. Chavi. Hi.
Two Woodmere people, except that it's 5 o'clock in the morning by her, so I think she's entitled to have it, But okay. Good Shabbos, everyone. Early good Shabbos. It's Wednesday. We're already starting in the next Shabbos, and we're Parshas Chayei Sarah. And so I want to talk about Emeinu. And you all know that the first Rashi is very famous, that she lived 127 years, 100 years like 20 years, 20 years like 7 years, right? Each part of her life was parallel and perfect. Ad kedei kach, to the point where it says in the Medrash that what was it that Abraham Avinu did when he said her eulogy, when he said the hesped for her? What did he say? So he said, Eishes Chayil miyimtza, the whole Eishes Chayil, Perek Lamed Aleph in Mishlei, that later on their descendants, Shlomo HaMelech, would actually record and write. And that's what Avraham Avinu said when he was eulogizing Sarah Emeinu. And so I want to bring out a few points, and this is again from the Shem Mishmuel. We're going to be using this year a lot, the Sefer Shem Mishmuel. Shem Mishmuel we use a lot of time. We used to use it many years ago. It's the Reb Shmuel Sakhatshav, who was a descendant of the Kotzker Rebbe on one hand, and his father was the Avnei Nezer. He was on one hand from the Hasidic world, on one hand from the Halachic world, and on one hand from the world of Kotzk, which is pure, truthfulness without playing around. It's just saying things straight as they are. You have to be careful in this generation. You can't say things as they are. You just can't. You have to sugarcoat everything. In one of the schools that I teach in, of the younger girls, we're the already older generation, but the younger girls, they tell us continuously, like, the kids are fragile. Be smart how you teach them, because they're very fragile. They can't handle too much. You have to be soft on them. You can't be tough on them. You can't get them too confused or too shaking, because they break. Okay, so that's the generation we're in. That's the generation of the kids. The generation that we're in, we can still handle a little bit of toughness. We can. So, and we don't break, and we just get stronger and stronger. As you just heard from Golda, she's in Nahariya, and there's booms all the time there, the whole north. And, she's saying, Baruch Hashem, Okay, so let's talk about Sarah Emeinu. It says about in Rashi that Sarah Emeinu's her days were timimim, were perfect. What does it mean, timimim, perfect? So there's a lot of different explanations of what that means. One of the explanations of timimim is without change, bli shinui, without change. And where does that come from? So the Shem Mishmuel says, and the Midrash brings this down, that because the Chumash said that Sarah Emeinu lived for 127 years. But look at how it's written. It's written, Mea Shana, Vesrim Shana, Vesheva Shanim, Shnei Chayei Sarah. Four times in the pasuk, the word Shana or Shanim or Shana, Shnei, is written. And the word Shana, which of course means years, also means a shinui, a change. For example, what is a year? A year is the four seasons, right? The changing from spring to summer to fall to winter. The changes and then back again to spring. It's that whole cycle of changes. That's called a shana. The shanot means to change, to advance, to evolve. That's what means shana. So the tzaddikim say like this: Sarah Emeinu didn't change, right? It says the first Rashi says she didn't change. She was like how she was 20, how she was 100 was how she was 20, no change. How she was 20 was how it was like how she was 7, no change. What does that mean, no change? Of course she changed. When she was 7 years old, she was a little girl. When she was 20 years old, she was entering into her strong years. And when she was 100 years old, she was already declining. That's what the Mishnah says. If you get to be 100, you're already, you can feel comfortable, taking a nap in the afternoon. If you're already 100 years old, you can forgive yourself to take a nap in the afternoon because you're already, most of the way in the other place. So, but she didn't change. So what does it mean she didn't change? So the Shemi Shmuel says from the Medrash something very beautiful. He says, we all go through periods in our life of change, right? We go through periods of even in world history, we go through periods of prosperity and periods of war and periods of bounty and then periods of drought, and there are always changes, right? So what happens when things change is that we need to change. So for example, let's say you have a headache. Okay, let's say you have a headache. So your behavior when you have a headache is different than your behavior when you're full of energy and you feel great, because your behavior changes depending on the circumstances. And so what the tzaddikim are telling us about Sarah Emeinu and the amazingness of her, and that's why she was the first one, was that she didn't change. Whatever her when it was an easy day, she was a devekas, she was attached to Hashem. When it was a challenging day, she was devekas to Hashem. She was attaching to Hashem. Her life, she wasn't moody, if we could put it into silly words of 21st century. She wasn't one of these people who was, one day I'm your friend, the next day I'm a little bit distant. I can't even tell you why because I can't explain it. Even she wasn't like this. She was absolutely consistent and persistent and completely devoted to her life's work. That's how she was able to survive 75 years of waiting for a child. How does one survive that? And then how does one survive the we can't call it a mistake because it happened, and everything that happened is the will of God. That's a tricky subject of free will and predestination, and we're not going to touch that subject. But how does she survive the quote unquote mistake or suggestion that she made to her husband to take Hagar? Then Hagar has this Yishmael, and Yishmael she sees in prophecy is going to be a thorn in our side until yesterday. How does she do all of that? So that's because she was one-minded in her devotion to Hashem. That's it. It was just Hashem. Now we're gonna learn something about Avram and Sarah. The first time I learned this, 30 years ago, I was a little bit insulted until I began to learn it deeply. So the Zohar says that Avraham Avinu was compared to the soul, and Sarah Emeinu was compared to the body of a person. We have a body, we have a soul. What's the primary part of us? Is the soul. What's the external physical part? Is the body. So that's what the Zohar says. Avram Avinu was the soul and Sarah Emeinu was the body. But then when you learn that same Zohar a little bit deeply, you see the following. In expanding that idea, the Zohar Kodesh says like this. How did Avram Avinu serve Hashem? How did he approach? How did he come? How did he learn? We know all the midrashim. He was a little boy. We don't know how old he was, but he was observing the world, and he began to look for the creator of the world, the balabait of the world, the producer director of this whole show, until finally Hashem appeared to him. Till first he figured out there is such a concept, because after all, he was living in a world where that concept was foreign. He finally figured out there's a concept of a creator of something, whatever he called Hashem. We call Hashem the name, right? The Almighty, the Eternal, and all the adjectives that we call Hashem. Tata, Abba, Daddy. So Avraham Avinu finally came to that realization all on his own. Now, Shem and Aver, his great-grandparents, were still around, but he hadn't met them yet, and he hadn't had the teachings from them yet. So he came to this on his own. So Avraham Avinu, when it says that he was the soul, it represents the concept of the seichel, of the mind. Sarah Emeinu was the heart. She didn't have to figure this out on her own, because remember that Avraham Avinu was 10 years older than she was. And so when she finally, and he was her uncle, so when she finally was of age, he explained everything to her. And what did that do in her, in Sarah Emeinu? What did that do in her? It lit up her heart. It lit up her teshukah, her desire to come close to Hashem. And so, let's go back. The first thing that we know about Sarah Emeinu, we know all the stories. That's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about is the inner makings of her being, of her consciousness. So the first thing that Sarah Emeinu was, that Rashi tells us, was she was consistent. And when things were challenging in her life, look, she was kidnapped twice by two different kings. And each of these kings were the richest, except for her own husband. They were rich, they were powerful, they were attractive. It says about Paro that that Paro, not the Paro that was later in Mitzrayim. The Paro that was later in Mitzrayim was not at all attractive. But this Paro, Chazal say, was a very, very, very brilliant, attractive man. And he wasn't just forcing himself on Sarah Emeinu. He was talking to her and convincing her and telling her how she could be the princess of the world, and she could have so much hashpa'ah, influence on all the people of the world, of the then civilized world, and etc. But still, she had gone through those terrible experiences, and she went through 75 years of barren, of not having a child, almost 75 years. How did she manage every month with the disappointment of the month? So Rashi tells us she was so consistent. Her personality was so rooted and so grounded on one level, which is why she's called the goof, the body, because of the four elements. The earth element is connected to the body, to the physicality. It's not a chisaron, it's not an insult for her. It's the exact opposite. It's the positive elements, the positive aspects of the earth element, which is absolute commitment. Not going back and forth. Earth doesn't move. It just stays. She was able to survive all the ups and downs of her life. She has to move from one country to another. You know that it says moving, divorce, and death are the three major anxieties of the world. And she had every month death because she didn't get pregnant. She had this moving, and Baruch Hashem, she didn't have divorce, but she had these traumatizing experiences. How did she stay steady? That's because she had the earth elements, strength, consistency. Now, the first letter of Sarah's name is a shin, and that tells us that she had the fire element, because the shin is a fire letter of Aish. So she had the fire element, which is the energy, the power, the determination, the ambition. On one hand, she didn't veer off of her goal. On the other hand, she had this very, very high and lofty goal. That's our grandmother. All of us have that. Avraham Avinu and Sarah Emeinu implanted in us, impregnated in us, in our soul, not in our body, but in our soul, the same midot that they themselves acquired by very hard work. We inherited it spiritually. We call it spiritual genetics. We know that Sarah Emeinu tried to do that for the whole world. She was so committed to serving Hashem that she wanted the whole world to serve Hashem. Emeinu taught the women, and then they were all invited to this big party, and she nursed all of their babies, hoping that some of her physical milk would go into these babies, and it would have a good hashpah, a good influence on the nations of the world. And so, on a certain level, even though they both were teachers, Avram Avinu, the men, and Sarah Emeinu, the women, Avram Avinu branched out into business, meaning he had negotiations with all these different people, including in our parsha, and he branched out into warfare when he went and he rescued Lot. And Sarah Emeinu branched into her way, in the female way of trying to bring God into the world, and that is by nursing these babies. And you know that when a woman nurses a baby, she has to have it. She should be thinking the right kinds of thoughts. Every year we talk about this in this last week's parsha, that when a woman is nursing a baby, she should not be watching stupid TV shows or reading a stupid magazine just to relax herself. She should be thinking nourishing, loving thoughts, good thoughts, because that the thoughts that she thinks goes into the milk that she's giving over to her baby, and that that has a hashpah, that has a very big influence on the child. And by the way, that's not just a nursing baby. That's anytime we're cooking. We can expand that and say that when we cook, we should have good thoughts. Put on a shir, listen to holy music, listen to the music of tzaddikim when you're cooking, or sing yourself, so that the energy, positive energy, goes into the food. And then the people who eat your food are being influenced by your positivity. So that was Sarah Emeinu's shana. She didn't change. All of her shanim were tov, were good. All of her years were good. The Shem Yishmael talks about, he talks about how on Shabbos we're supposed to also feel that we don't need to change the world. We're forbidden to do on Shabbat. We don't do constructive malacha. We don't create. And one of the reasons that we don't have to create and we don't have to make shinuyim, changes, is because we're supposed to remember that Shabbos is Hashem's domain. We're just receiving the or of Shabbos. We don't have to build a house. We don't have to write a letter. All of those categories of malacha that Moshe Rabbeinu taught us in the desert. We don't need that on Shabbat, because on Shabbat all your work is done, right? Like the famous song. Okay, that's one thing about Sarah Emeinu that we can gather from her, and we see that about her only after she died. It doesn't say in the Parshas Vayera, in Parshas Lech Lecha Vayera, where we meet Sarah Emeinu, we don't hear about her consistency and her devotion and her earth fire elements. We don't hear about that, only when she dies. And so the Medrash tells us something very interesting. In that same vein, the Medrash says, why is it that if you look at the Medrash on Mishlei of Eishes Chayil, we once did that. I think we once learned it together. That it says that he said about Sarah Emeinu, all of Eishes Chayil. So, for example, it says about Sarah Emeinu, the Shem Yishmael says, every time it talks about in Eishes Chayil, for example, all the days of her life, were the same. She didn't have her ups and downs. But even though it was nighttime, which was a down part, Laila always represents negativity and challenges and things. When things are not easy, she still is behaving. She gets up. She's right? All the Lailas in her life, she didn't. It didn't change with her. She was always, on a certain level, she was always the same. You know, I remember when I was a little girl. So I come from, my parents were Hungarian and Romanian, Czechoslovakia, and all those countries that got all mixed up, mixed and matched after World War II. But basically, all of us remember that Shabbos, you have to go back when you're a kid. The Shabbos menu, what was the Shabbos menu in your house? It was always the same by Ashkenazim and by Sephardim. Always the same menu. You had Friday night, you had after Kiddush and Hamotzi, then you had fish, you had gefilte fish. And then you had chicken soup, then you had chicken and rice and carrots and kugel, and that's all, then dessert, whatever, if you had dessert. So I remember when I was a teenager, I remember, and I started cooking. I once wanted to make, for Shabbos, I made broccoli kugel. And I was so excited, broccoli kugel. And I brought it to the table, and my father he said, "What is that?" I said, "It's broccoli kugel." Kugel. He said, "That's not kugel." I said, "Yeah, it's a different kind of kugel. It's broccoli kugel." My father said, "That's not Shabbos food. You can't eat that as a Shabbos meal." I said, "Oh, come on, Daddy." Of course, he gave in, of course. But the idea that we have a certain consistency in how we do things, and that's good in the Jewish world because we're stubborn. Am Kshei Oref, we're a stubborn nation. That's the only reason that we survived, and that we're halachic. As many as people try to change us, modernize us, change Judaism, change the Torah, all of that. No, we have the earth element and the fire element of we don't change, we stay the same. Of course, we have to adapt, right? We're not wearing biblical clothing now because we don't even know what that is. And we do have broccoli kugel now and whatever, the things that don't really matter. But the things that matter in halacha, we don't change them. I always think about if Moshe Rabbeinu would come and he would appear. Okay, Moshe Rabbeinu was a genius, and he would in 2 seconds be able to figure out everything here. But if he would come into your house on Shabbos and he would see candles and kiddush, and okay, he wouldn't necessarily recognize the kind of cutlery we have and plates and dishes and food, but it's the same Shabbos. It's just the same Shabbos. It's the same Kedas Moshe Yisrael, right? At every wedding, if Moshe Rabbeinu would come to a wedding, we say, "Harein Mekudeshes," right? We're marrying Kedat Moshe Yisrael according to the teachings of Moshe and the Jewish people. That's tradition. Okay, that was one thing of Sarah Emeinu. Now the second thing of Sarah Emeinu is a little bit deeper that I want to talk about. You know that after she dies, so Ravina wants to purchase from Ephron Hachiti the Maras Machpelah. Ephron Hachiti was he was from the tribe of Chet Tav, not Chet, not a sin, but the Chitim, the Hittites, and he lived in Hebron, and he wanted to, and Avraham Avinu knows that's where Adam Harishon is buried in Chava. No one else knew that. Avraham Avinu knew that. And therefore, he knew that that's the place where it's the burial ground for the Jewish people, number one. But number two, something that the Zohar tells us is that Avraham Avinu and Sarah Emeinu both perceived that the Maras HaMachpelah is the doorway between this world and the next world, and Gan Eden. It's the portal that all souls go through. When a soul is leaving the body and it has to leave this world, leave the physical world, and is finally free. So where does it go? Like, how does that happen? So in the mystical literature, we're taught that the soul flies all the way to Hebron, and in Hebron makes its way down those roads into the Maras Machpelah. And in the Maras Machpelah, the cave where they're buried, there's a portal there, and the soul zoom goes up to Gan Eden from Maras Machpelah. So it was under the ownership of this Canaanite person called Ephron Hachiti, and Avraham Avinu has to enter into the negotiations with him and to purchase it. So the tzaddikim point out something very interesting, and when you're reading the Chumash on Shabbos, you'll go to shul. or even if you're going to read the parsha before, and you'll see. Every time Ephron Hachiti's name is mentioned, it's spelled Ayin, Pei, Resh, Vav, Nun, Ephron. But as soon as Avram Avinu purchases the Maras Machpelah from him, his name is written without chaser the Vav. The Vav in the end, Ayin, Pei, Resh, Nun. There's no Vav, it's chaser. His name was written in the contracted form. And so the Shem Mishmol teaches us a very, very interesting lesson. And we've noticed that lesson over and over again, of the lesson of Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker, which means first comes the night, then comes the day. That's how God made this world. First comes the dark, gives birth to the light. First comes the shell, protects the fruit. First comes the birth pangs, then comes the baby. First comes the challenge, then comes the Yeshua. That's how Hashem made the world. And even though we know that before the challenge, way before, Hashem always prepares the refuah for us, the healing, but we know that it doesn't manifest in the physical world until after. Let's say a person has a headache. And Hashem says, you know what, for a headache, you can take an Excedrin. I'm just making up something. So that Excedrin is in your closet, and you're not paying attention to it. And all of a sudden, Excedrin is like Tylenol, it's like Acamel. So let's say you have this in your closet someplace because you once bought it, because you once wanted to make sure that your medicine chest is full of all the junk that they sell in the drugstore, just in case. So yeah, but you wouldn't pay attention to that box of medicine unless you had a headache. Meanwhile, the headache is there, and the medicine is there. So the medicine was there before the headache, but you wouldn't have taken out the medicine until you had the headache. So there's a concept, and Hashem created this world, and it actually manifests in all areas of the physical world. You take a seed and you plant it before the Chazal tell these examples, not me. I mean, they didn't say about the headache, but they say similar. You take a seed and you plant it, right? Or you take a seed with your children, you want to make a project with them. You take a seed, you put it into cotton ball with a little water, until you see that the seed bursts open and it begins to fall apart. Then little roots come on the bottom and come on the top. So that's what Chazal say. That's how Hashem made this world, that there has to be a hiddenness to a blessing. David HaMelech had to come from the Benos and Lot, and from Yehud and Tamar, and then Bathsheba, and all of those negativities. That's how God chose to make this world, until Mashiach comes. When Mashiach comes, things flip over into a different pattern and a different schedule, a different system. But right now, the system is Vayhi Erev, Vayhi Boker. So Chazal tells us like this. Ephron was a rich man, but he was not elevated spiritually, just the opposite. If you look at his name, I mean, don't give any of your kids this name. Ephron is Afar. Afar is earth. The same earth element that Sarah Emeinu had in the positive, in that she was stubborn, meaning stubborn in a good way. She was committed, and she didn't veer right or left, and she just was consistent. That same Mita, Ephron had, Afar, Ephron, but in a negative way. He was very Afar, he was very Megusham, he was very materialistic, he was very rich, he was very money hungry, he lusted after Abraham Avinu's money. That's why he charged him 400 shekels in those days. Somebody once made the calculation, it's like millions or billions of dollars, some outrageous amount of money. And he said, oh, between me and you rich people, what's 400 shekels? In other words, between me and you, what's $1 trillion? Like nothing. Chazal say that he mamish lusted after Abraham Avinu's wealth. So he was the negative aspect of the earth element. And in his property was the earth, because Marat HaMachpelah, Chevron, of the four cities, right? Yerushalayim, Hebron, Sfat, Tiberia, and their suburbs. In other words, Yerushalayim and its suburbs, and Hebron, etc. So Yerushalayim is the fire element, and Hebron is the earth element. On the low is the essential part of Israel, and above, the air element is Tzfat, and the water element is Tiberia in the north, right? So that same earth element, Maran HaMachpelah, was given over in Hebron, the earth city, to Ephron, the earth man, the earthy man, and in the beginning. And now Avram Avinu has to redeem it from Ephron. But listen to this. It says in the Medrash on the Parsha, it says that the pasuk Zama Sadeh Batikachehu, that she plans to buy a field, and she actually purchased it. So this is the Maras Machpelah. This is the Sadeh, the field, and the Maras Machpelah that Sarah planned and purchased. So the tzaddikim say, wait a minute, Sarah was not alive anymore, and Avram Avinu was planning it and purchasing it to bury her. So what does it mean she planned and purchased it? And how was it that at her funeral, when they were at the cave, the Maran HaMachpelah, about to bring her in, he said, she purchased this, when he had just purchased this. So the Shem Yishmael teaches us a very interesting lesson. It's hard to put into words. Remember we learned before that Abraham was the mind and Sarah was the heart, because Abraham Avinu figured everything out on his own. Then he taught Sarah. And then Sarah decided to devote her life to serving Hashem, as Abraham did, as Abraham Avinu did. But Chazal tell us that what she did, what Sarah Emeinu succeeded in doing, wasn't just to serve Hashem. She succeeded in awakening and arousing and stimulating her emotions, so that even though she was this earth element, which is generally non-emotional and rather committed and consistent, but she added to that the water element of emotion, of cheshek. Chazal call it cheshek, a desire not just to serve Hashem, but to serve Hashem with love. To serve Hashem with love. Not just to serve Hashem with consistency. I get up, I daven, I say the brachas, I do everything right. No. She added to that an element of devotion, but emotional devotion, heartfelt devotion, motherly devotion. And so she was really the one, and she knew that just like Avraham Avinu knew, that the Maras Machpelah was the portal from this world to the next world. That means there's what's a door? A door from one room to the next. So it has the elements of one of the first. Let's say a door from the outside door from your house. The outside door from your house has an element of outsideness, because it's the outer part of the door is outside, and insideness, because it brings you into the house. So that was what Maran HaMachpelah was. It was of this world, and yet it was the portal into the next world. It was the shaft that the soul flies up to the next world, and that same cheshek, the same emotion, the same longing, the same drawing, that the soul is drawn out of the body, and if the person is lucky, it's drawn out of love, out of the body, and the soul is drawn up to heaven because it wants to reunite with Hashem. So too, that was what Maras Machpelah was. It was a place of that interface. And Sarah Emeinu, because she activated her desire to draw God into this world and to draw herself close to God, not just in a logical way, but in an emotional totality way, a holistic way. So that's why it says she was the one who, in her merit, acquired the Maras Machpelah, even though she wasn't alive anymore. But Avraham Avinu said, your cheshek to unite God in this world was what gave you the zuchut, the merit, to be buried in this place, which unites this world and the next world, this world and the world of souls. Her shukah, her desire, her longing to make this world into a place for Hashem. It's like a back and forth, right? Because a portal goes up and down. I don't know if souls come into this world through that portal. The truth is, I don't know. I know that souls go out of this world through that portal. Do they come into this world first? I don't know. I don't think I ever saw that in the Sefer. But certainly they go out of this world in that portal. And Chazal tell us something else about this idea of a doorway, an in and out. And that is like this. When a Jew in this world wants to love Hashem, then we begin the work here that's called Itaruta Dilatata, Isarusa Dilatata, right? We awaken our hearts in this world to loving God. And then what happens is Hashem sends back love towards us. You send a kiss, Hashem sends you a kiss. And sometimes it goes the other way. Sometimes Hashem sees that we're not strong enough independently to wake up love. So he sends us a good day. He showers on us some love, and then we respond by saying thank you, and by responding with love. Some people, you should know that some people, if you observe certain people when they have challenges, they just fall apart. And of course, Hashem is in charge of all of these things. We don't know. But some people you can see, they fall apart during challenges. And some people, but they thrive during blessed times. Like if they're having a good day, they daven. I'm not minimizing their davening and saying, well, it's only because they're saying thank you because they're having a good day. Some people, the nature of their soul is that it responds positively. And some people, believe it or not, respond to negativity when they're challenged. They actually, I don't know too many people like this, and certainly it's not me, but some people thrive on challenges. They like they like it when they're in a position of anisayon and a test, and they gird their loins, so to speak, and they do it. They pull through. So sometimes Hashem sees that we are not strong enough, and He gives us a blessing, like a freebie, a good day. And sometimes Hashem sees that He waits for us to make the first step. Who's going to do tshuva first? Hashiveinu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva, right? Hashiveinu Hashem Elecha, return us to you, Hashem. Help us to do tshuva. And then Hashem says to us, Shuva elai v'ashuva elechem. You come to me, I'll then come back to you. It's always a dance back and forth. Who's the leading of the dance? And every single minute is different. Every single day is different. So here it says about Sarah Emeinu, because she had such a cheshek, she had such a desire to accomplish, to make this world a better place. That was what removed the vav out of Ephron's name and gave the Maras Machpelah over to us, to Avraham Avinu and Sarah Emeinu. And then he was left with nothing. He had his 400 shekel kesef, which again is millions of dollars. That's what Ephron had. He didn't have the sadeh anymore. He didn't have the field, and he didn't have the Maras Machpelah. And that became ours forever and ever. And this Shabbat, of course, is Shabbos Chayesara. And a lot of seminary kids and yeshiva kids are going to Hebron. They should all be safe, and Hashem should give them good weather. It shouldn't be too cold. It shouldn't rain, and they should all enjoy being close to our Elter and our ancestors. I want to just tell you that last week I had to cut the shiur class short because we had a little cute challenge, and Baruch Hashem, everything is fine. I'm apologizing. Last week I sort of like left you in the lurch on Zoom, and then I did the same thing on YouTube. I was able to edit the YouTube, but anyway, everything is just fine. Baruch Hashem. So we have the shir this week of Yitzchak Avinu, Sarah, and Rivka Emeinu. It says, Chazal tells something very interesting, that you know that in Parshas Lech Lecha you have Avram Avinu, and then in Parshas Vayetze you have Yaakov Avinu. You don't have Yitzchak Avinu alone in any parsha. Either he's with Avram Avinu or he's with his son Yaakov Avinu. But he's so gevura. Yitzchak Avinu is gevura. You don't have gevura alone. It has to be mitigated a little bit. It has to be sweetened, or with chesed, or with tiferes. So this week Yitzchak Avinu is getting married. A lot of weddings happened this week. They should all build by Never Be Israel. Let me say hi to everybody. Hi, Rabbi Tzimrochel. And hi, Gitzi. Thank you always for doing what you do. Don't go off.
And Can I ask a question?
And hi, 1 second. Hi, Davida.
Okay.
And hi, Rabbi Tzimchana. And hi again, Gold. And hi, Yosfia. Who wants to ask a question?
Davida.
Hi, Davida. Ask a question.
So it just got me thinking earlier when you said that you really have to be thinking great, pure thoughts and listening to shir and not reading a magazine when you're nursing the baby. So it made me think you're really creating this person. And I just thought but you do that on Shabbos. And it just struck me as something so creative, nurturing your baby.
Meaning,
I don't know, I just feel like that's such an act of creation. I'm asking you.
Oh, so feed someone is an act of creation?
No, the way you said when a nursing mother shouldn't watch TV and shouldn't do this and that. So if you're really doing it on the madrega that you said, it seems very
creative.
I know it's always special. I don't know if it just seemed to me interesting that.
So what's the question? You're not allowed to do that on Shabbos?
No, I know you're allowed to, but it seemed interesting to me that you are allowed to.
Right. Listen, you're also allowed to sweep the floor, and you're allowed to set the table, and you're allowed to make a salad. Our rabbis are the ones who explain to us what the creativity, what exactly are creative actions, what exactly are not creative actions. Some people on Shabbos, look, Yal Tzvi is on now. She's the youngest of the chevra here. She has a bunch of kids. I'm sure Shabbos is not her relaxing day, right? No.
Right.
So that's how it is, when you have a young family, Shabbos is not relaxing, but there's a different level of, it's a different level of, everybody knows we detach on Shabbos, we disconnect from the world, and we're just in our own little Dalit Amos. I do not know how people live without Shabbos, without being forced to disconnect from the screens and from all of these gadgets. I know that as much as I'm, because you live in Israel, now I have Baruch Hashem, a lot of my family is here, but when everybody was still in America, so on Shabbos, like Friday, to disconnect the phone was did I talk to everybody? Did I say good Shabbos to everybody? There was a whole, and when I finally turned off the phone, I had part of me was still in America thinking, well, what about this one? What about that one? Now when I turn off the phone, it's oh, thank you, Hashem. As much as the phone is so important to us nowadays, everything's on the phone. But yeah.
I guess I just really felt like that. How you described it really elevated it so much from flipping through a magazine. I just never had envisioned it. It was.
Listen,
great.
I want to tell you something. I'll tell you a story that happened in Sfat years and years ago, and somebody, the people who this happened to actually might even hear this. So I once gave this lesson. I talk a lot about thinking kavanot when you have kavanot when you're cooking. What you're supposed to think about when you're cooking. I've been doing this for years and years and years. So one time, one of my students told me such a funny story. She said like this. She and her husband live in Sfat. Okay, I don't know if they still live there because I'm out of touch with them for maybe 25 years. But they used to live in Sfat, and they had an open house. Shabbos, they had open house, meaning they never knew who was coming. They used to cook they cooked as much as they could, and however many people came is what they shared with their food. Anyway, and also, all the Shabbos, This is before they had the Shabbos app. Now there's a Shabbos app. If you want to go to a certain city for Shabbos, you just put it into the Shabbos app, and you can decide. And the people who want Shabbos company, right, can say, I want to get two guests to Shabbos. They should be, two girls, Shabbos, or two girls begin, whatever. There's a whole app of that. It's called Shabbos something. I forgot what it's called. My students told me all about it. So it was before this, but there was not, but there still was the Kiruv organization. So this couple said that they always knew that the Kiruv organizations knew that they could send 5 people to them Friday night and 10 people Shabbos morning, whatever it was. And you know how it is when you go to a shaman's house for Shabbos, that you're a stranger, you're a guest, you're on your best behavior. Anyway, she said that particular Friday night, she said it was a whole bunch of new guests came, and everyone introducing, hello, 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 where you from? Huh? And at the Shabbos table, the guests began bickering with each other. These are strangers, as someone who's hosting them out of the goodness of their heart. And there was some kind of a discussion, and they were fighting and bickering, ad kadei kach, to the point where the couple said they couldn't. They just brought out dessert. Like, okay, let's finish this meal. They brought out dessert, and they finished the meal, and everybody left. And it was a very bad experience. It was a hard experience for them. And then she heard this shir. We were talking about having kavan and food, and then she called me and she said, "You're not going to believe this. My husband and I were discussing afterwards, what was that?" And we realized her husband and her, they cooked together on Friday. He's off from yeshiva or off from work, whatever he was doing, and that's his thing. They're in the kitchen together, they're cooking together. That's their bonding time. And they were having a fight. They were cooking, and they themselves were having a fight. And they concluded that the negative energy of their own fight somehow went into the food, and the guests who ate that food, started fighting. And she's called me to tell me this.
Can I tell you a very quick story?
She said she never ever, let me just, Golden, let me just finish. She said the next time they made up, that's it. Never are we going to do that again. We're always going to get along, or we're not going to cook together. If we're in a fight, I'll cook this stuff and you'll cook, but never together. We're never going to fight. Whatever. Yeah, let's hear your story.
Very quick. So I was single, and I used to be very afraid of cooking for people. I had like a phobia. I could cook for myself, but anyway. But some women were coming for, my friends, and I had to make a soup, and I was terrified. So what did I do? I kept saying over and over, I don't know where this came from, please Hashem, make the soup healing. Please make it healing. That's all I could do, like a mantra to get me out of my fear. So I served the soup, and one of my friends, who took one taste, and she said, "Oh, the soup is so healing."
Whoa. Whoa.
Great.
That's a great story. There's a story there of David Lelever, also his wife. He brought home once, they were very poor, and he brought home once David Lelever, that's from Meilach Biederman's great. So, grandfather. So he once brought home unexpectedly a guest in the middle of whatever for lunch, and they were very poor. His wife had nothing in the house, nothing but a little bit of oatmeal, like oats. So she cooked the oats, and she gave it to them. That's all she had. She cooked it with water, and the next day the wife of this guest came. The next day the wife of this guest came and said, "Tell me the recipe. What did you make? My husband can't stop talking about it. He says it tasted like Gan Eden." So she started laughing. She said, "I don't have a recipe. I just had some oats in the house." And the other woman said, "No, you must have done something. What'd you do? Well, you put in some cinnamon. You put in some what?" She said, "I'll tell you what I did. I put in prayers, tefillah, because I felt so embarrassed. I had nothing to give this chashuv guest. Your husband's a big rav. He's a chashuv. He's an important man. And my husband's also an important man. And I wanted them to have strength to be able to learn. But I had nothing in the house, just some oats. So I said, Hashem, please, you have a whole Gan Eden. In Gan Eden, you must have very delicious spices. Pour some of those spices into my food." So it must be your husband tasted the spices of Gan Eden. And this Rebbetzin David Lelever, had her like you. Her tefillah were answered right away. Golda, you had right away. Your tefillah were manifest and answered. So too should Hashem always answer your tefillah and l'tova v'livracha v'lisimcha for all of us, Bezrat Hashem.
I have a tefillah that is that asks that at the time of Shabbos that the tablet of Shabbos should be added to the food.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Anyone wants it, you can email me, and you can also arrange for payment at the same time.
I remember when I first moved into Har Nof, the Yarkan. Gitzi, were you here like 20, I don't know how many years ago?
Yes, the one from Yesh that said L'Chavod Shabbos.
L'Chavod Shabbos Kodesh. The first time he saw me, when I first moved in, he's a little Taimani man. I couldn't imagine how he was able to lift up those crates of oranges. And he said to me, the first time he saw me, because I was a newbie in the community, I was new. He said, I came on a Thursday, I was picking out whatever, and he said, did you say L'Chavod Shabbat Kodesh? L'Chavod Shabbos Kodesh? I said, what? He said, everything you have to buy. You say, Kol HaKinuyot, L'Chavod Shabbos Kodesh. That's what I do. And he was my Rebbe in Kavod Shabbos Kodesh. Whatever. And you say also, Kol HaNikayon, L'Kavod Shabbos Kodesh, Kol HaSidurim, L'Kavod, whatever you're doing is Kavod Shabbos Kodesh. And today's Wednesday. We can start already. Okay, bye, everybody. Have a wonderful Shabbos, a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Gitzi. Thank you for everybody for coming.